So how do we travel? Mostly by bus. Sometimes there's one flight involved. There is a train, and you take the train at Lucknow, and here is the rather ornate railway station Lucknow. That's part of the India experience, is traveling by rail. You're going from Lucknow to Varanasi. And there may be a boat, there may be a rickshaw, there may be other forms of transport. We like to have variety in our tours, and we like to reflect the countries where we visit, and transport is part of that. So we've got a tuk-tuk in the picture, and that you may well be in a tuk-tuk on this tour. David's now going to talk a little bit about the structure of the palliative care in India and the tour.
So we want to give you just a taste. My job is to give you a taste of palliative and end-of-life care under these headings. I was saying earlier, with looking at the stereotypes, what we like to do on the tours is give people a feel under the skin, the realities of life through the thing we're all interested in, is how healthcare is delivered, plus all the other famous things that people think about when they think about India. And somebody said, when you describe India, the opposite is also true. There's such diversity, contradiction, and so on.
I suppose now I'm going to talk about the professional visits and what we visit where. And then David can go into a little bit more detail about those visits. So the tour, as I mentioned, starts in Delhi. Delhi being the capital, it has the large health institutions. It also has a lot of the NGOs and a lot of the early adopters, for want of a better word. So we're starting with CanSport, which is very much an early adopter. This is a patient-focused cancer support system NGO that was started by a rather dynamic person who David will talk about in more detail. The Shanti Avenida Hospice is a hospice as similar to hospices that we would be familiar with, but are not common in India. And finally, AIIMS, the All India Institute of Medical Science. Probably, I might upset some people here, probably the most prestigious medical institution in India. And the palliative care department there is highly renowned. I suppose there's two big centres of palliative care in India. One would be AIIMS, and the other would be down in the south with Dr. Raja Gopal in Kerala and Trivandrum. So this is very much the centre of palliative care in the north of India, and where the team is based. And it is a multidisciplinary approach at AIIMS. And we're saying welcome at this stage with the Shanti Avenida Ashram, which turned into the hospice. And again, David will talk about that a little bit later on. While in Delhi, the other side of Delhi, obviously, is the sights, the sound, the colours of this bustling Indian city, and particularly the Silk Bazaar, which people have been to in the past and enjoyed. We travel on to Rajasthan, and here we are in Jaipur, this magnificent amber fort. It really is extremely impressive. And within the fort, which is a great fortress on a hill, we've got this amazing palace, which is quite stunning. Professional visits when you're in Jaipur, the Bhagwan Mahavir Cancer Hospital, and we're having a bit of a focus there on health promotion, on preventative measures, on engaging with the public and their work, education, a rather dynamic person who's involved in that, who people meet on the tour. And the Chakrapati Ayurvedic Centre, when looking at palliative care, it's a very broad church. It's clinicians, social workers, occupational therapists, and people in a whole range of backgrounds and professionals. And traditional medicine is often part of that, and massage is part of that. And we explore that at the Ayurvedic Centre. Ayurveda is the traditional Indian medical system, said to be the oldest in the world, said to have spread from India to China, and that's what I've been told in India. So I learned something slightly different in China, but I think it probably is. I think it started in India and spread to China. Here we see the Palace of the Wind. Jaipur is full of many, many beautiful buildings and wonderful sights, sounds and colours. And these are tribal a tribal group. David will talk about the many different groups and societies that you meet across India, 22 nationalities, 22 nations, 22 languages, I think probably more actually. We travel on to Agra. There aren't any professional visits in Agra, but the reason we're here is, well, we're looking at the reason we're here. Quite often in travel, we use a lot of superlatives. Quite often in travel, we write this rather flowery copy about places you go and see. Sometimes what you're seeing goes beyond that. And I'm going to stick my neck out here and say that this structure, this building, the Taj Mahal, which is a monument to love, is more beautiful in real life than any picture can do justice. It's absolutely stunning, and at different times of the day, because of the white marble with little gems and quartz inlaid in it, it sparkles. It's really a quite magnificent building. So that's what you see in Agra. That's the reason you go to Agra, and there's a reason why you go to Agra, and there it is again at a different time. Beautiful proportions. We go on to Lucknow. Lucknow is one of my favorite cities in India. I talked earlier that it is Shia Muslim. Shia is the dominant form of Islam in Persia, in Iran. And there's a lot of Iranian Persian influences in terms of the architecture, the food. It's very famous for its textiles as well. It's beautiful, very fine woven cloth. In terms of its cuisine, delicious cuisine, particularly kebabs. And you can do a kebab tour, which we did on the last tour, which we'll do on this tour, which you do at night, and people enjoy it. And you go to different restaurants on tour, sampling different kebabs. But again, it's got a lovely location on the river, and it's got some very beautiful buildings. I mean, this building, this is the Martinez School. So there's also the residency, which people may know of from the Indian Mutiny, or the First War of Independence in Lucknow. We travel from here from a rather ornate railway station I showed you earlier, and there it is again, and you take the train to Varanasi. Now, this is the great spiritual center. It's on the Ganges, and here we have the Ghats and the Ganges. It's life and death meet in Varanasi, and it's every Hindu, I believe, has to go to Varanasi once as part of their life. And you'll see on the Ghats of Varanasi the funeral pyres where people are being cremated. And we go in the early morning, we go again in the evening when all life is taking part on the Ganges. And it's a really special place. The professional visit here is Benares Hindu University, where we have a fantastic talk on Hindu spirituality, on the belief system in the belief systems of India, and how that relates to palliative care. And obviously it has to relate to palliative care, part and parcel of it. So we're then going on to, this is a lady praying in the Ganges. And we're going on to Calcutta, I think the third largest city in India. Very interesting history. Obviously, Mother Teresa based here. When I first went to the 90s, I remember thinking, oh, it's a bit run down. And then I've been more recently, it's gradually being transformed, and it's what is being revealed is a rather beautiful city. A lot of interesting Georgian architecture, and a great hybrid of Hindu, I suppose, and Anglo architecture. We're looking at the Victoria Memorial, which obviously is sort of, I suppose a hybrid of the two. The professional visit here is the Saroj Gupta Cancer Hospital, which is both a private hospital and a charity hospital, and one funds the other. And this is a model you find all over India, and it works very, very well. And it's a fantastic hospital. The people there are really engaged in the work they do. And again, David will talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. So the tour ends in Calcutta, and here we have the Marigold Market, where you can buy your marigolds, and you can buy lots of marigolds. But I'm ending the tour through India with this slide because it just shows the sort of the colour, the dynamism, the creativity of India, which you see in all aspects of Indian society, including in its healthcare. David.
We wanted to come back to the founder of hospice and palliative care worldwide, Cicely Saunders. And I was very graced and grateful to work with her for many years, off and on, while I was at St. Christopher's Hospice in London. She said, go around and see what is being done and see how your own circumstances can produce another version. There is a need for diversity in this field of palliative care. Yes, we'll see and we'll witness one way of doing things among the 7 or 8 professional visits we're going on, but it's surprisingly such a rich opportunity for us to take away ideas, to see how they do it, how they stretch their resources, how they meet the challenges. So I guarantee you'll find practices, methods, strategies that really speak to you about, well, why don't we do it in England, in Australia, or wherever you come from? And even if you just take away one thing, it'll be a gem. In our work, in our practice, we use stories and narratives. We listen to the patient, the family, start where they're coming from, their background, their crises. And of course, in India is rich in its oral history and how information, ideas, culture is moved around. So we will be listening to a lot of stories, sometimes directly from patients, from volunteers, and from our opposite numbers, maybe from a physiotherapist, a nurse, specialist nurse, a counsellor, and so on. And we know that stories are rich because they give us knowledge. They help us with the whole assessment and planning process. But it also allows us to acknowledge the person and affirm the experience. And we'll be having loads of conversations with professionals and their experiences of working in different settings and different contexts in India. Yeah, so just some comments about some of the challenges that I've come across that have been brought up as we've been taking groups around. And one, I must just mention, it was on my early visit with Cancer Support, and some well-meaning friend from England said to me, they love biros, do take as many biros to give away. So I spent weeks collecting biros in my home and from friends, and had 2 or 3 wadges full. Went on a visit to Zita with the Cancer Support team, with a doctor, nurse and counsellor. And it was quite hard to find Zita's home because it was in a slum area, unmade roads and paths, and her husband ran the shop with about 6 things that he would say sold. And she had 2 children being looked after in Bihar by her sisters. She was the total picture of total pain, as we know in palliative care. That's what we work with, the holistic care, but she was in total pain. She'd been discharged from hospital the day before because her husband had taken her to the local general hospital, public hospital, and they said there's nothing more we can do. And I've never seen anyone in such pain as 35-year-old Zita. And the team got there, and within a short space of time, they'd given her morphine and she started to feel better. She had social pain, psychological pain. She had a 12-year-old daughter 2 years before who had died by falling out of a rickshaw, and she never spoke of that child again. And she was just keeping herself going for her 2 other children to be brought back by her sisters the next day. And she was so pleased to have a visitor. As many of the visits, people are so honored and pleased to think people have bothered to come and visit the service from around the world. And she was whispering something to her husband, and he stretched out because all the things they sold were in the one room hanging on the wall, all the stock. And he got something from the wall and she gave it to me, and it was a biro. And she was so grateful to have an international visitor. I just had to share that with you because I still remember Zita. So this is a patient when we were visiting the service in Jaipur, and this man came in unexpectedly to what was the day center, which was one large room, not so large, and I think there were 21 of us from the tour in that room, trying to understand the day services that are provided. And this man came in and was demanding to see a doctor because he had symptoms that needed controlling. And this is the woman doctor who was seeing him. But what you can't see, he came with his 25 members of his family, and they all had questions, they were all involved. We say in palliative and end-of-life care, the unit of care is the family, nothing more so than in India. So yeah, we had to smile, and he was loving it. He was loving being the center of attention. We talked with members of the MDT, the multidisciplinary team, and it's great if one can speak with one's opposite number. And we've arranged a specialist palliative nursing seminar for with Cancer Support and AIMS from Delhi. And excuse me putting the social worker, I'm a social worker and counsellor, as the Superman or Superwoman here, just to tease you. So you can look at this in your own time. India is full of challenges, poverty, a gradual aging population, dementia increasing, very limited prevention in cancer care and other care, a culture of exploiting the potential for profits by offering futile medical treatments, huge stigma, taboos around cancer, families that gatekeep what the patient should know about their own diagnosis and prognosis. So huge needs for education in end-of-life care for doctors and other healthcare workers. And yes, we'll be visiting units where very much the traditional palliative care, that trinity of care, research, underpinned by education, is developing or has developed. So a little bit about the culture. We've been looking at a range of cultures and contexts. Just can support working in some of the most difficult urban areas that you don't always get with other services, and the challenges for finding enough volunteers, funds, and even finding where people live. Understanding how culture affects feelings, thinking, doing, behaving, family systems, patterns. One familiar scenario might be familiar to you is still there are women who aren't allowed to see the doctor, the consultant, the physician, leave alone have her breast examined when she's having severe medical problems, because it's a senior member of the family, the mother-in-law, the father who decides, who gatekeeps, and the huge ethical and just survival implications for that sort of behavior.
I was talking to David about this yesterday, and some of you may know of the Christian Medical Centre in Vellore in southern India. Now, this was a hospital that was founded by Ida Scudder in 1901. Ida Scudder was an American lady whose father was a doctor, and she was used to hearing screams of young women in childbirth that her father couldn't do anything to help. And so she grew up with young Indian women dying through complications. And she decided that she had no plans to become a doctor before that, but she decided that this was unforgivable, that there were no women doctors who could treat these young women. So she went back to the United States in the late 19th century, when it was unusual for women to train as doctors. It only just started, and she trained as a doctor. She came back as a practicing physician to Vellore in southern India, and she founded a one-bedroom hospital. That one-bedroom hospital these days is a 500-bed multi-specialty teaching hospital. They're pioneers in so many areas, including palliative care. And David, you know the palliative care team.
Yeah,
there,
Professor and the various colleagues there. Yeah.
So it's
great.
You know, you can see, and I would say, I mean, actually, CMC Valor is a pioneer in so many ways in physio-occupational therapy, midwifery, and it's at the cutting edge of progressive healthcare in India.
One of the strengths, thinking of what are some of the great strengths, family care, although there are different levels of it, but certainly spiritual care. And I smile when I talk and lecture to UK colleagues when we talk about religious and spiritual care and the role in palliative care and in treating and responding to people's needs. And very often they say, oh, we're not religious, but we're spiritual. Whereas in India, you find the religious and the spiritual very much, and the philosophical, the existential, all come together. And people aren't shy. It's much more of a public statement that I'm religious and what feeds me, which is a strength, because families and patients also very often have that strength, if not also the questions that people have when they're facing their own mortality.
That's right, it's part and parcel of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think people would find it hard to perceive of life without that spiritual component.
Yeah.
And you see that everywhere in India. It's, you know,
yeah. Smile when you're speaking to a group of staff and you say something, do you have a religion or are you religious? And their heads are all shaking together and they're very open and honest and very ready to talk about their religion. So there are many, many cultural, I'm fascinated by the differences and the commonality when I go, each time I go. And certainly there are cultural differences with family structures, roles, gender, identity and gender roles, belief systems, behaviors, communication values. But also we see at close hand the bonds, the attachments, the care for offspring, the need to connect and nurture one's loved ones, to form relationships, and of course, use of internet.
Universal.
Yeah. This is some years old, but this is a ranking, an international study, a fine international study, where if you're from the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Germany, you might be very pleased to see we're all at the top of the ranking of 80 countries. India in this study, 2015, was 67th out of 18. So just a few words about each of the visits, very briefly. This is a team I went out with from Cancer Support. They have over 25 teams, all MDTs, nurse, doctor, and counsellor. And often one of the basic challenges is the driver, because they need to get long distances, has struggles in finding where the patient is. So Cancer Support is a home care service founded about 25 years ago in the whole urban complex of Delhi and surrounding districts, and founded by an outstanding lady, Hamala Gupta, who had cancer herself when she was in Canada and had very good treatment. She got back in the 1990s to Delhi and found there wasn't one service to help people with cancer or meeting groups to help each other. And she founded Cancer Support. She came to St. Christopher's on our bursary program. I was working there as Director of Education and Training, and she was followed by members of her team. And she's gone on developing the service now, 25 years. And they're now seeing 20,000 patients a year. And they've set up in India 5 other areas providing services like Cancer Support. So it's been great to see the progression. A lot of their staff now are trained trainers, and I've been very grateful to be allowed to be involved over the years with going over to help them with their training and supervision.
I think that's something you mentioned there, David, is the scale in India,
Yeah.
just the sheer numbers. I know the pain and palliative care unit in North Kerala, and when I was talking to them, and they said, we're in infancy, we've got a couple of million people signed up, and that was in the early days. So the scale is
we
different.
hope to be hearing from Hamala Gupta herself. But in India, there's a lot that's developed, a huge amount, but for the whole 1.35 billion population, it's small. One of the leading lights, Dr. Raja Gopal from Palliative India and Kerala, wrote, in India, as we near the end of life, we cease to be treated as human beings and become mere containers of disease. But looking at some of the visits with can support, there are amazing examples of care and commitment, but also sad examples of sheer lies, oppression and control, even by doctors. Still, many doctors don't know how to prescribe and give morphine, and still have the same myths that the general population has. So a lot of training is being done. There are a huge number of diplomas and qualifications and good training from the leading agencies, but there's a lot of work still to be done. So just summarizing just very quickly going through the challenges and the commonality and difference. So we just go through fairly rapidly the strengths, the religious and spiritual values, the stigma and taboos about having cancer still rampant in many quarters, the lack of prevention unless you've got the money to pay for testing and early treatment, more use of high-tech methods, certainly communities rallying support, heroic treatments being given to the very end, family caregivers being screening information, but also providing strong support and resources. They say about 99% of the population don't have palliative care, and only 1% to 4% of the population have access to morphine or opioids. And I checked those statistics with Dr. Raj just before, as I was preparing these slides. Still limited palliative care education and a limited amount of patient autonomy. Thank you. This is the palliative care unit. As we heard, we'll be going to the All India Medical Center in Delhi with Professor Shushma, who's another leading light. She's been very impressive. She's got a fine academic department at the acute end of care. So we'll be seeing that as patients are being diagnosed in oncology departments, but also needing palliative care. Her doctors, many doctors and nurses in her unit are steeped in a research project. They're pushing out the boundaries. She chairs the Indian Association of Palliative Care, and she's been very involved with other leaders in India in negotiating with the government over morphine accessibility and opioids generally.
And she's very dynamic, isn't she? And she's, when we visit her, the department works very unpolitical. It's multidisciplinary. And when we visit there, social workers there, the occupational therapists, she has the whole palliative care team. I mean, hopefully she will be there. We never know. But the great lady herself.
But looking forward to meeting us, unless she's called away for the government report or something.
And she's also the editor of the Indian Palliative Care Journal.
Yeah, she edits the main journal in palliative care. And Shanti Abedna Hospice, an eye-opener. This is, they provide what we call in England very much the terminal care end. of the spectrum, and they do that really well. There are a lot of people, a very high proportion of head and neck, people with head and neck cancers in India, and certainly at Shanti Vedna. And the religious nurses run the unit and do a fine job and work very closely. What we see in Delhi is the network of palliative care, from early diagnosis at AIMS to the ongoing care with over 2,000 patients at a time with cancer support, and very much end-of-life terminal care given by the Shanta Vedna Hospice.
I suppose in many respects, along with Kerala, it's at the forefront of palliative care in India, isn't it? It's the model.
Yeah, it's the model. Yeah. One lovely thing at the Shanti Vedna, the last time we went, we've been very careful not to, only to speak or say hello to patients with permission. But one lady wanted to do something for us. Having said it's largely head and neck cancers, but of course, the whole range of cancers. And she wanted to sing to us. And she just sang beautifully. I mean, it's just that one memory of the loads of photos and videos one could take is worth going for. So yeah, lots of home visits and meeting teams who go out to this, like this young girl here being cared for by cancer support at home. Going on to Jaipur, back to Dr. Anjum, the medical director there. We were hearing about the health promotion, education. So these are all the services. But Dr. Anjum, who's one of the most dynamic, enthusiastic and inspirational people, the queue of the Jon Baines tour on the last occasion was endless, because everyone wanted a bit of her and to speak to her. And they kept referring to her right through the tour. And she very kindly gave me this slide, which is one of the challenges in India, as I've mentioned. The patient is linked, tied up to every ATM machine in the land here. And
I think the level of the amount that's given by the central government from the budget for health is about 1 to 2%. Yeah. With the UK, it's maybe 8, in Australia, maybe 10%.
Yeah. And just to two things about the Ayurvedic medicine and care. We felt we couldn't take a tour to India, particularly with the kind of work involved in end-of-life care and palliative care, without experiencing something, learning something of the basics of Ayurveda. Because let's face it, most people in India will be getting some level of Ayurvedic medicine, not the fine services of traditional palliative care that have been developed. And we'll be going to visit Chakrapati Ayurvedic Center in Jaipur and listening to how they work and some of the understanding of this very fine holistic approach. But also for people who want to, we can sample and have a taste of some of the treatments. And people don't have to, but those who went really valued that. And some people went home, went back the next day. One of the group had an ongoing pain in the neck and shoulder, which was really troubling her. And she went back and had a session, and she actually came back saying it was, that pain had just lifted magically. But whatever it is, it had helped her.
I think it's important as well to have an open mind. I was telling David yesterday a sad story of a friend of mine who died when he was 32. He had a brain tumour, which is diagnosed when he was 30. And towards the end of his life, he was having physical, mental, social, psychological issues. And his mother was very set on taking him to somebody called the psychic surgeon. It's out in Essex, in West London. And I wasn't sure about this, and I thought she was being built up to be let down. But his ex-girlfriend said, "Look, this is what Maggie wants. Let's do it for her." So we drove with Graham, and he was in a very bad mood. I had to pretty much almost carry him, and it was quite heavy at the time. Steroids was quite big. And so we went out there. He would normally know who I am by touching my nose. And he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to know who I was. He was in a foul mood, and there was no energy, and there's a lot of negativity. So we went there, and I went to the psychic surgeon with Graham, and I wasn't encouraged by what I saw there. On the wall was Buddha and Jesus and Sai Baba and lots of gurus. And I was thinking, I'm not sure about this. And the guy said, put his hand on Graham's head and said, I'm not sure what I can do. And I sort of rather angrily said, well, he's got terminal illness, so I'm not sure either. I came back about 45 minutes later, and Graham was transformed. He was full of energy. His eyes were shining. He sort of heard me come in and said, oh, hi, Jon. He knew it was me all along. He needed my help for balance, but he walked pretty much by himself, and he was full of energy. I looked at the psychic surgeon, who was completely grey, and it was Reiki, and to this day, I do not understand what happened, but it transformed Graham, and for a short period of time afterwards, his life had improved, and it made a real difference. So I'm much more open-minded, I think it's fair to say, than I was as regards what we might call alternative medicine or traditional belief. And of course, massage is used in lots of settings anyway, and that's part of Ayurvedic medicine. So I think it's well worth keeping an open mind.
And out of interest, a lot of the Ayurvedic practitioners have been asking for, when they hear about it, some palliative care training. So the traditional palliative care. So I think we can move on. So just finishing off on some of the visits. This is a lady I went to visit with cancer support, actually with the counsellor on her left. And she was, it was a kind of family system that some of us would really be concerned about, that was abusive. She was in her late 50s. She was looked after by her son, who was away most of the time, but by her daughter-in-law, who was pretty severe and punitive and dictatorial with her. And this lady was very down. She wasn't sure if she wanted the chemotherapy being offered, and nothing was making her happy. And we said, as some of you will have said to people, so what actually makes you happy? What makes the difference to you? And she immediately looked to her young granddaughter and was just reminded of some of the things still worth living for. I mean, that sounds very simplistic, but a lot of other things went into that. But this is just one of hundreds of patients that one sees. And yes, we do try and understand the key rituals that support families, that accompany the whole experience of death and dying during the tour. And there's space to ask questions if there are special interests. So commonality and difference, I'm often left thinking there's more commonality than difference. And when cancer support were seeing this man top left, I was also involved in seeing this man in the UK, bottom right. And, it just reminded me that people really need sensitivity, commitment, compassion, collaboration, and good teamwork, good communication, and just good basic care. And just another view of in the day center, a boy who was just connecting, that cohesion, that relationship being so important with his social worker from cancer support. And cancer support, and sharing cancer support because I have permission to show these slides, and have been a number of times to cancer support. And the volunteers, I mean, the resources that they make work for them. This happened to be an English volunteer living in the area, and she's a musician and very artistic, and people use the resources to the full, and she's made so much difference to the children in the day center. I said to the workers, I love elephants, and I was going to take back an elephant for each of my grandchildren. And I say to my grandchildren, I'm not sure how I'm going to fit them all in my suitcase. And they heard about this, and the next thing we go to the next slide. The next thing, the children, these are children with end-of-life care, made me a set of elephants to take back to my sitting room in London. So, yeah, just coming to the end, the training of staff is so important, and more importantly, training the trainers. We don't want Western people to be just flying in for a week, doing training with nothing, then progressing. I do tell the people here, nurses, counsellors, social workers, mainly ladies, they're kind of really dressing up for me to come to a lecture or a talk or a workshop, and they laugh. But you know, the colours and the garments are so beautiful. Thank you. So I just want to finish on the few words about the tour with Calcutta, where I happen to have been born. The palliative care unit there, again, a leading unit in Bengal amongst one or two others. And I just love this notice that they have in their clinical room. They're having a clinical meeting, review meeting at the moment. They really want to work to a pain-free zone for everyone who needs it. And I just remember it was the Australian nurses on the last group I took, the visit, and the Sarogupta hospice, the palliative care unit, laid on a splendid meal. We didn't expect it at all. And we knew they were short of money because although they're a fee-paying cancer hospital, any surplus is used to run totally free, quite a sophisticated now palliative care unit. And the Jon Baines group, led by the Australian nurses, was so impressed that they passed the bowl around, if you like, for donations, and we raised a handsome amount to give back to the staff. They were absolutely thrilled. And if you go there, you'll see how child-centered it is for child patients and adult patients. And there's a little toy train that we have the privilege of going round in.
Oh, you went on that?
Yeah, the whole group went on that. That was one of the highlights of the visit, and a good photo opportunity.
Yeah, no, some most beautiful grounds as well. Yeah.
So I want to thank our colleagues in India for allowing me to use some of these pictures. But, you know, I've always come away with hope, even though one sees some sad moments. And of course, this is the younger generation. Hopefully doctors, nurses, physios, social workers, counselors, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so thank you for listening.
And if there's any questions, I'll stop the share now. I don't know if anybody has any questions, and if so, if you want to unmute yourself to ask David or me, but probably David. No, it doesn't look like it. Okay. Well, I'd like to, at this stage, thank everyone for joining us. We will be editing this because I think it might need a little bit of editing, and we will be sending it out to various organisations and societies who've asked to hear about palliative care in India. One thing I think I'd like to end on is we've been running palliative care tours to India probably about 12 years now, to the north and the south. And every time we go, we see the development of palliative care. And it's a huge country with huge problems, you know, very limited resources. But one thing that always stands out in India, above and beyond most countries I go to, is the dedication, the passion, and the creativity of the people involved across healthcare, but I would say particularly within palliative care. There's a lot of innovation going on. And every time you go, you see it moving, you see it moving forward, and you see it spreading, and you see a good idea in one place spreading to other places. And it's great to see. It's good, you know, amongst the need. And yeah, I suppose we're all part of it, aren't we? So.
Can I just end with two phrases from dear Cicely Saunders, who's the woman, other than my wife, the woman who's probably influenced me more on this planet than anybody else. Dear Cicely, and as you probably know, she often said a dying patient is a living person, and how true that is of India as we go around the what we call the professional visits. And also, you'll know that she said, you matter because you are you, and you matter to the last moment of your life. And to see that in front of us in India, as well as our own countries, is a great honor.
Thank you, everyone. And if you do have any questions afterwards, sorry, is there anyone? If you do have any questions afterwards, please email us and I can pass them on to David, and we can get back in contact. Many thanks. Goodbye. Bye-bye.